You know, when I was living alone, after about 7 years, I started to feel like something was off and it was no longer a natural way to live. Everything seemed right on paper, like I live on my own, I have my own space, I'm raising my daughter, we have our own life. But we started to miss the company and the shared responsibility and the mutual care that exists when you live in a family. That's the type of family I grew up in my mother's home. And when you come from a tight-knit family like that, it's really hard to forget. So when my auntie passed away, my father's wife, I got the opportunity to live out these ideologies of group economics and combining your wealth and resources with the group. And that's what I did. I gave up my apartment and I joined my father's house. And although it came with its challenges, I did this not because I had to, but because it made sense to keep the estate strong and to keep the wealth and family resources inside the family. And if you really think about it, that's not failure. It's strategy, it's loyalty, and it's long-term thinking. And this is the way that we were taught that the early humans lived. In our high school anthropology classes, we learned that the early humans survived in groups and that they were so scared of being kicked out of the group, so much so that these intrinsic fears still exist within us today. But the truth is that we're the same as the early humans. We are social creatures, and living in groups is the most beneficial lifestyle. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that, or we were taught the opposite. And that personal independence and individuality was the goal, no matter the cost to your lifestyle, no matter the cost of living, and no matter the cost to your mental health and well-being. Now, take it from me, I lived alone. I lived as a wife and stepmom. I lived alone as a single mom. And in all of my experiences, I could tell that living in a family group is beneficial. It's the best social organization when done right. And it's the way to build a strong family organization, wealth, and generational wealth. So although living alone could have its benefits for some people at some points in their life, the idea that moving back to a family home is a step back is actually keeping the individuals and the family members financially weaker than they could be if they lived as a group, an organization. So hear me out. Here are 5 false ideas about living with your family that we need to debunk. So the first one is that living with your family means you didn't make it. You know, the dominant belief systems teach us that moving out and doing it on your own is what you need to do before it's actually necessary. Like, unless you get married and you need to start your own household, why would you rush to spread your wealth and spend your wealth outside of the family? You know, we see this idea manifested when children grow up, and as soon as they get a good paying job, that's it. They leave the family home and they spend their wealth elsewhere, sometimes even paying off somebody else's mortgage. And because everyone's so preoccupied with their own individuality, they end up mistreating the family members in their home because they don't recognize the value of each other. But the corporate benefits are that people are spending more and they're keeping less. I mean, think about it. There are separate bills, separate subscriptions, separate groceries, separate rents. Okay, we've basically multiplied every expense, but we haven't become more wealthy or more successful. We as a society have only become financially divided. But historically, even in my own family history amongst my ancestors, we got great security from living as a group. Like, my uncle told me about how our family in Guyana used to live. So he grew up in Guyana in the 50s and 60s, and he would tell me about how his aunties and uncles and grandparents survived as a group. There were 11 kids in that family, the 2 parents and a grandmother. As soon as one of the children became of age to work, they were either given a hustle or they got a job. And a portion of their income would be given to the matriarch, the grandmother in this case. Out of that money, everybody's needs were provided for. Everybody had school fees, everybody had medicine, everyone had clothing, everyone had a place to live, because the family was so big that some family members ended up traveling to other towns to run businesses. The grandmother, out of the family wealth, was able to set up housing for some of the siblings when they went to run a business in other towns. And these children grew up to become very successful. They became nurses, teachers, headmasters, government workers. Everybody was still able to pursue their own direction in life. So living as a group didn't hinder them at all. It was actually the foundation for their launch pad, basically. It provided the security that so many people crave today, right? People want affordable living. People want to be able to travel, have vacations. People want their children to be successful and have their education paid for. In my family history, this was all possible because everyone contributed to the tribe. Everybody recognized the value of sticking together. So the second false idea that we need to debunk when it comes to living with your family is that you only move back home when you need to get your personal finances right before moving on with your life. This is a huge mindset problem and a visionary problem. Because if you only see yourself as living at home until you get your stuff together, until you're ready to move on, it means that you're not thinking about investing in the family asset, which is the family home. You're not thinking about expanding the family estate either. And you're definitely not thinking about being part of a family organization who invests with each other and creates family wealth for the current generation and future generations. In households that don't have a shared vision, when the children grow up and become teenagers or young adults, everyone's just living for themselves. There is no more family direction. There is no shared vision. The household becomes chaotic. Nobody wants to contribute equally. And this chaos just reinforces the idea that, hey, I need to get out of here as soon as I can, and that I need to just move out for my mental health, right? The truth is that we're supposed to self-improve while contributing to the group, like in my Guyanese family's example. Always remember that the power of the group is greater than the sum of each part. But if there is even one weak link in the chain, the whole organization suffers. The third idea about family that we need to debunk is that it should be easy to cut family people off. This whole idea of cutting people off has gotten out of control. This is a dominant belief system that's been around for a while in social media, cutting people off, even cutting family members off. But you can't cut your family members off. Your family members share your genetic material, your oldest memories, and your future to an extent, because I guarantee you at some part of the future, you will see that family member again. Because you're bound by blood. Family is bound by blood. And you can't escape that. Friends by nature are distant and temporary because they are preoccupied with their own families. So you're doing a huge disservice to yourself by cutting off who's supposed to be your closest allies. This is the mindset that we should be coming from, that your family members are your closest bonds, and they are your means for security, love, and charity and belonging. We should remember to see the best in our family members and always be open to reconciliation, inshallah. Another false idea about families that we need to debunk is that only the income earners have value in the family. And this undermines the value of the elderly, the women, and children. So in this book on family wealth that I'm reading, this is what the author says about family wealth. He says that very few families have understood that their wealth consists of three forms of capital: human, intellectual, and then financial. Even fewer families have understood that without active stewardship of their human and intellectual capital, they cannot preserve their financial capital. And the issue most critical to the failure of a family to preserve its wealth is that they concentrate on the family's financial capital to the exclusion of its human and intellectual capital. So basically, the growth of the human and intellectual capital in a family is what drives the financial capital. And financial capital on its own has no intrinsic value because it could be lost or misappropriated. But the true value of a family lies in its members and who they are and what they know, what they do for the group, and what they apply. So any family member who takes on the organization of the group and reiterates the values, looks after everybody's nurture and well-being and individual growth and success is a huge part of the family's value, although they may not be a top income earner. Now, the last false idea about living with family that we have to debunk is this idea that personal power comes from leaving the group. You know, as a mother, I noticed the brainwashing in children's programming about how they should find their individuality and their success by breaking away from the family. You know, in these shows on Netflix, there's so much messaging and indoctrination and brainwashing about not getting along with your family. Lots of siblings fighting with each other, lying to parents, not trusting parents, parents being unreasonable to legitimize the idea of trusting your friends over your family, over your parents. Everything about these shows teach our kids that you need to break away from your group at some point in order to find happiness and personal success. This creates an environment in our heads where we forget to consider the well-being of the group. We forget to look out for each other and help each other because we're so self-centered. What I don't see enough of is messages reinforcing collective power through organizing in groups like your family group. And that's exactly what our children need more of these days. Our children need more content that teaches them to work within the traditional family group to build and preserve family wealth. Because real power comes from organized groups like the mastermind. When people combine their income, knowledge, skills, and efforts, something powerful happens. Your little family turns into a powerful organization. Now, I get it. Creating systems of living together and working cooperatively and building family wealth, it takes time and it's extremely difficult, mainly because of everybody's individual naffs, right? Our own personal defects, coupled with brainwashing and a lack of humility, to be honest. You know, our society is very self-centered. But according to the Family Wealth book, if we want to accumulate wealth in our families and grow it and preserve it, the family organization needs to have 6 qualities: a system of governance, spiritual unity, a positive social impact on each individual family member, a family differentness, and financial backing. And implementing this level of family organization requires documentation. And this is where the idea of the family constitution comes from. And this is what I really want to geek out and talk about on this YouTube channel. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about how families can reorganize themselves, create their own family constitutions, and start generating real wealth, stability, and long-term power on purpose. Thank you for listening today. May peace be upon you and the mercy of God and his bounties.